Can cannabis be an ambassador for business leadership? Tsehaitu Abye is an Ethiopian-American cannabis entrepreneur, political organizer, artist, and member of the Pennsylvania Farmers Union who advocates for equitable cannabis legislation. She is also the founder and executive director of Black Dragon Breakfast Club, a community-based organization focused on creating platforms and positioning Black women in leadership positions and businesses within the cannabis industry. In this edition of Cannabis World Journals, Tsehaitu Abye tells us about her journey as a marketing consultant and entrepreneurial leader within the cannabis space.
Okay, how did you start your journey in the cannabis industry?
Yeah, I started probably unknowingly while I was living on a cannabis farm in California, probably close to 10 years ago now. My one of my ex-partners owned a farm, a legal farm in the Emerald Triangle. And so we started dating, and then I was living on his farm. And then more formally, probably started when I moved back to Philadelphia and I attended a cannabis conference and saw very small amounts of people there and small amounts of like Black people there.
Wow, that's very interesting. How old are you?
I'm 36.
Oh my God. You don't seem like 36 years old. No. I'm curious, how was Black Dragon Breakfast Club born?
Yeah, I was born with a previous business partner. Before Black Dragon, there was another business idea and concept that I left the name with the current business owner and left the work that we kind of started and chose to work on my own. And that brand still exists down in the world. One day I will decide to mention them, but I've learned to do that less. And so this is actually the second business name kind of even and an idea that birthed probably 6 months after that first one. And it was initiated from wanting to create gatherings just to kind of connect with people in the cannabis industry in Philadelphia. Just, you know, you go to a big event at a convention center, you see there's barely anybody there, and then you're like, well, where is everybody? So the first thought is I'm an organizer, labor organizer by career, by trade. So I, you know, justice, change laws, right? Like improve minimum wage, you just do grassroots stuff. You just get out, you get into a community, you host an event, you start talking to people, you start to engage. You know, I just kind of brought in those strategies that I had already used for my jobs as a organizer, community organizer and activist. And so I did the same. And my business partner at the time also came from that similar background. So we both were kind of coming from this perspective, we're going to do gatherings. And then but we're both actually from the hospitality industry too. So we're going to have them be some food gatherings too. And then I also was in the space of, I was working with a startup that eventually got like $5 million of investment money. And so I was doing a lot of work around marketing and branding and creatives. And so I brought all of that together. And so we started to do an event called the Rise and Grind. And I say all this to say the Rise and Grind was a daytime event on a Wednesday from 10 to 2 for people to network around cannabis. And this was all before the pandemic. And I would, you know, bring in entertainment, bring in artists, have it at a private art gallery, have a security guard. And so all of that and food and kind of brunch, breakfast food, and we'd have different topics and things happening. And so we knew it was going to be some type of like food thing, right? And so there was the idea of supper club, but we were like, it's not going to be in the evening because we're not really evening people. We're morning people too. We are also the people who consume coffee sometimes and consume cannabis. So that's where this morning energy, and that oftentimes becomes the most, sometimes some very like energetic energy, right? Comes about from that. And so it was really just inspired from that. So we said, hey, no supper club, let's go with breakfast club. And then we started to talk more about, when people talk about you being a fish because you drink a lot.
Okay.
Well, there's also then this, you're a dragon because you smoke a lot. And so from
That's
there,
very interesting, by the way.
and then from there, we knew we needed to make sure, because I'm a very multicultural, it's not just race, class, it's not just black and white, it's race, class, gender, immigration, it's the color gradient, it's so much more than what they've minimized it in the US. But I had to remember, we're Black women, so it should probably be Black first. So that's literally where Black Dragon Breakfast Club comes about. I will say, in hindsight, I probably should have chose a shorter name, but we have BDBC.
Oh my God, I'm so, wow, you're amazing. You're an amazing person. And what you do is just fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm so glad to meet you. You're a very kind person.
Thank
You're a
you.
very kind person.
That name is really something. I wanted to go back to the first question, where your connection with cannabis. What was the element or the situation that triggered you, that said, well, okay, I lived in a cannabis farm and I learned about the plant, but what triggered you to go into the business or go into this, besides your skills as organizer and all that? What was that moment that said, I need to do this, or what situation brought that in?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was attending the conference, and I had invited, you see, the conference was like $500 and I didn't have the money to attend that. I was working at a startup at the time because I can be very like, I believe in the cause, so I will work for free. And so I kind of went out on a stretch, and I had reached out to them on social media, and they said, I pitched myself and who I am and how I work with creatives. And I'm also an organizer and activist. And do you have any tickets you can give me? And they said, yeah, we'll give you tickets. And so I went and gave those tickets back to some of my peers. And some of those peers were a videographer that I brought in, and we started to just record content during the 3-day conference. We didn't have a plan, but it was just, they gave me extra tickets. Let's just make the most of it. And 2 other people that I invited were the 2 people that I was once business partners with. So you kind of have to understand, it literally was the conference, was me taking a leap of faith and saying, I don't have the money. I'm broke right now. I'm going through a master's program, just finished a master's program. I'm working as an intern at this organization. I quit my organizing job to commit to this startup for creatives, but I need to attend this conference. It's right down the street. And so just by me putting myself out there, they gave me 15 free tickets. I attend an empty conference the first day, invite people the next day, and all of us, it was a moment of, there's opportunity here. Let's jump on it. And my personality is, I will do what I say for the most part. So it's like, let's go. So literally, one gentleman, we started a business together. And then we stopped because of the challenges. I was still new to business. I had just gotten an MBA. And I was working at a startup. This is my first time working in more so for-profit spaces. I was used to working in nonprofit spaces, union organizing, labor union. So this is me kind of trying to transfer my skill sets too. I've learned that organizing is social justice sales. And now I'm trying to figure out a way to make money off of my skills and transfer them into marketing. And I have people around me who are like, there's also an opportunity, Tsehaitu. And you happen to be one of the people who actually lived on a farm. But now at this point, I didn't understand cannabis was medicine yet. And I didn't understand exactly when you start a business, there's then the LLC and the web domain and who owns that and who owns the Gmail. And then who comes up with the decisions and the contract. I was new to business. So there is a lot of ups and downs that happen. BDBC got our LLC in 2019. But if I'm not mistaken, this conference occurred in either 2017 or 2018. And between that time, I was doing the rise and grind, working with different business owners, business partners. And eventually it got to a couple months before December 2019, I said, okay, this is just my business and let's make it official. Let's get this LLC. Because I even considered changing the name to Black Crystal Dragon. It's like I went through like a breakup of a business partner through it all. And then throughout the process of like, okay, so it's an official business. That means we have to make money. We can't just be doing this nonprofit community stuff. Like I'm just I finally have a job now. Now I'm just using my paycheck, but I'm like, wait a minute, what's a real for profit? So then I had to kind of bring in my MBA, right? But it's all new still. And so my nature is to come from a nonprofit strategy. And so it's been a challenge to make sure, hey, use your marketing skills.
Wow, that's quite a journey, because when we start anything new, we don't know what we're gonna find.
Yeah, we don't know. And so it becomes this kind of like, okay, I'll roll with everything that's flowing, especially in the cannabis industry. And I will take the strides of that not necessarily working, or I didn't even know that cannabis was medicine when I first started doing stuff with cannabis. I didn't even have my medical marijuana card. I was still in the like, that's a conspiracy and I don't want the government to know who I am. I'm still in that. And don't mind, like, let me be clear. There's a lot of problems with medical cannabis, especially in PA. And we could go down that pathway of like where we're, you know what I mean? Like, and the corporatized cannabis and how the quality goes down and how it's too expensive and we can't even afford it. And I should probably move back to California anyway, because my medicine is more affordable. But here.
Yeah, it's really conflicting how, since there's no federal law to it, you have these different politics going on in different states, and people get affected by it, and even doing business is really more difficult because of it.
Yeah. And so like I've been navigating it. These are a pack of cannabis affirmation cards we came up with. You know, over the journey, I took a design thinking course and I learned, okay, we're solving a problem. What is the core problem? The core problem is the perception of cannabis is negative. And in order to do anything that I need to do, I need to change the perception. So I said, okay, all right, that's our mission. Change the perception of cannabis. Then we can do whatever we need to do. We can actually get a loan to operate. And then maybe I won't spend all my own personal money all the time. So it's been an interesting journey. And then now it's been a lot of, okay, we're going to just survive. We're just going to stay afloat. We know marketing helps us get there. We know events are great. Let's improve our processes so we can get those sponsorship dollars. Let me make sure I have a good, solid internal team so people who are like me, who want to enter the cannabis industry and have skills, can work with me. And we can build out kind of something that I was building out at that startup that I was at before, where I was like a team member and had my own frustrations, but was never the founder. And so now I have that opportunity to bring in all that I've learned and do it in the cannabis space, where also I don't have to be hiding the fact that I consume cannabis, because that was all on top of it, was like wherever you're working, whatever you're doing, you're hiding the fact that you use cannabis. And I'm a social justice activist. I'm a labor organizer. Like I deserve to be in peace without a doubt. And then you add on that during the pandemic. So I have an estranged father who was deported back to Ethiopia, and I didn't really know him. I probably saw him a couple times. So I'd never seen him for about 20 years. And while I was living on the cannabis farm, I got enough money saved up to buy a ticket to visit him in Ethiopia. And then during the pandemic, while we were talking regularly, because he does tourism in Ethiopia now, but you couldn't do much tourism because of the pandemic, that allowed us to talk regularly, I think, because he was more stationary. And I've been going through, you know, as I say, I learned cannabis is medicine. That makes me then have to learn I have anxiety and PTSD. And then it forces some of the family members to realize, not the only one. Like, we are the problem. And I lost my train of thought.
You were talking about how you had with the money you
Oh
You were
yeah.
able to go to visit your father, and did you
as
connect back? Did you connect
Yeah.
back with him?
So then lost my train of thought because it's such an emotional topic.
Of course.
And so during the pandemic, I found out that's why he was deported for cannabis cultivation.
God. So there was a connection between you two, and it was the plant. How amazing.
The whole time, never knew. And my mom never told me, never even, and who knows if she had the conversation with him about why. I never knew. And I had been estranged from him for so long, for years. And then I didn't hear from him until he had been locked up in a penitentiary in Albuquerque, New Mexico when I was a teenager. And then he got deported and I never knew why. And then when I was 18, I started consuming for the first time. And then it was like the conference that I attended in Philadelphia that kind of prompted all of these things. And that's a surprise because I've lived on a farm already before. You know, I mean, it's not like I lived in Hawaii where cannabis was okay. And the worst case that I'd ever had was like consumed on campus and got suspended, never arrested, nothing traumatic as an adult, you know? And it wasn't until I started the business and I started, you know, being like, as an organizer, you have to hold space and be a facilitator. And so I knew I was running a business, and the problems I had at my old companies and startups was that founders didn't really hold space and facilitate community. They just dictate. And so this kind of brought an opportunity to do all of those things. But I'm working through my own trauma, my own, like, I am also consuming. And so I'm also working through the shame and the stigma too, as I build the business and try to do it kind of differently from this very Western, masculine, capitalistic way of operating too.
It's incredible what you're telling us, because recently, well, a couple of weeks ago, we interviewed this Argentine non-profit organization called Mama Cultiva, and their story is so similar to yours, because she also says that they build these communities where they talk about the plant and they talk about how to cultivate, and they interchange information and all that. And it's amazing to see how you are in one part of the world and they are in another part of the world, and basically the plant has given them the opportunity to make a community, and this community transpolates to everywhere. There's no geographic limitation to it.
No, it's really, it's interesting because so many things are similar, and all we kind of need is some agent to show us how we are similar and different, because it's that agent that connects us anyway. And sometimes the agent is a television show or a president or a favorite food or a person in our family. And other times it can be a plant called cannabis. And there's that. And then there's all the other stuff about how we abuse things. And we misuse things and we misperceive things, but that's all the other stuff. At the core, let's talk about what an agent can do.
How do you view the cannabis industry at this time, after all these experiences that you have lived through, building your business? And do you think there has been progress? What is your perspective on it?
Yeah, the cannabis industry is interesting. I'll say from a personal place, it feels like the wild, wild west, and that there aren't any standards. But then as I get to know business more, that's new to me, and I look back at nonprofit stuff, a lot of this is wild, wild west. Like, you know, we have rules and stuff, but Black people don't even get protected by the law or justice. So it's still the wild, wild west. And I'm coming from a person who is a newer business, you know, professional. And so maybe the more seasoned person might say something different, right? Obviously, you can't access banking in cannabis, but you can in the regular business world. And if I was in the regular business world and didn't include cannabis in my work, I guess I could get the different loans and stuff like that. But I'm still new to business. Like, I think a lot of people who enter the cannabis industry, they're new to business. And so it's just new in general. But I also think it's a interesting place to learn about our system and our business and how we operate, because it's so new. you're able to relearn what's happening and also learn something new, right? Because like you don't have it where it's some industry that's so traditional.
There are no set rules. So
Right.
you are able to make your own and you even break the old ones or the pre-existing ones or the assumed ones so that you can make new ones that fit better.
Exactly. And so in that way, I appreciate the space. It's why I entered the space, because I didn't feel like I was fitting in a lot of environments. Even as an organizer, I didn't like that. I didn't appreciate the way organizers are being treated and the way the nonprofit industrial complex is. It's a joke. And even the business world is a joke. That's why I got into the business world, so I could understand it, so I could know what both of them are. So it's not a me against them type of thing. And then being in the cannabis space allows me to try things and explore without, right, this traditional perspective. And I find for me, existing in the world requires me to change people's perceptions anyway. So I might as well be me in this industry than all these other old traditional industries that are definitely not leading us to heaven.
It's true. And do you think right now there is this space? I mean, the industry, how it is at this time, do you think it is giving this space? It is working towards it? Or do you think they're still set in the ways of the traditional business models?
I mean, I think with media, more people are able to learn that big corporations don't always help us as a whole, and that we have to invest in small businesses and individuals. And so I think if we can continue to think about that, and the ways in which we now have to think about things as intersecting, if we can continue to think about different things as intersecting, then I think it can all support that. If we can kind of, okay, we know our government doesn't really care about us. That's not even the way it was designed. Well, what can we do to fix that? I guess it's like if we can continue to use our critical minds and continue to critically think, which I think is happening from like our Gen Z communities that are just like, well, why are we doing this if it's damaging the earth, right? Well, if it's medicine, let me have my medicine because y'all are all crazy nuts. Like if we can keep that perspective, then I think we can go somewhere interesting with the cannabis industry. But if this is just another wave of intellectualism and free-spiritedness that tends to happen, at least in American history, then maybe we're setting ourselves up for some other, like, cultural failure, like we're dumbing ourselves down. Like, and those are things that I think about too, which is challenging. I know I use cannabis to help me, and I was raised as a vegetarian alternative. My middle name is Om. My family moved to Hawaii. I have spiritual teachers. Like I was definitely given a lot of alternative ways of thinking. And yet I still find myself struggling with surviving and living and being in a peaceful mindset in our society. And so I say all that to say, if it's hard for me, it's got to be hard for a lot of other people. And for many people in the world, we're just trying to make it through our days. I'm not saying that you medicate yourself, but this idea that if we meditate all day and we do yoga and we eat well and we sing songs, that'll make everything okay. That's just not true. We have hundreds of years of generations of trauma. We have entire nations that are living in trauma, that are completely operating in trauma and aren't even recognizing it. Whereas the US, we're finally having these conversations around mental health, right? We've created an entire persona of how it is to be a leader based on fuckery, based on mental unwellness. We had an entire president that was unwell. We had Trump who was unwell. We continue to create wars that continue to create more trauma. We will continue to have people who have nervous systems that are out of whack. We continue to have sugar be a legal substance, and yet it's killing people, creating diseases, and we wonder why. Cigarettes are legal. So we're not, it's like, as long as we're pretending like our government is in support of optimal health, we'll stay on this pathway. But once we all accept there's a system and a game going on, it ain't got nothing to do with you being healthy and balanced.
Yeah, it's unfair because at the same time you have this speech that goes, well, drink and alcohol and cigarettes, and oh, well, yeah, tobacco gives cancer, but it will keep selling it. We'll give it, sugar. We have an obesity crisis right now, but don't worry, we'll keep making the drinks bigger and everything. So, yeah.
Yeah, so we know science works to refine things as much as they can. And McDonald's is probably a company that really supports a lot of countries and cities and governments, right? Let's look at what was it, North Korea, Samsung don't care about their people because Samsung is making so much money for the country that the government has no power. We don't have a Democratic Party. Like, it's a money party, right? We get mad at companies, but then we go and invest in them on Fridays. It actually doesn't make sense. The same people that will be upset are investing, or their company's 401k is invested in the same company you're like, I make it make sense, guys. And so I say all that to say, like, having a law that says cannabis is a Schedule I drug is a joke anyway. It's only because it stays in your system. Like, we already know this history, right? Like, people are legally using coke all the time. Like, most politicians are using some type of upper drug to stay up all day, like, or they're drinking every night. I mean, it's like, what exactly are we? Are we talking about concerned about people's health and well-being? Because that's not true, because we allowed Pfizer to just throw Oxycontin in everybody's home. We did that. We let them change the way we even ask about your health. Are you in pain? Let me put you on a scale so I can then, that's a precedence for me to give you a prescription drug. So
yeah, I think it comes really clear with the opioid crisis, because it's right there. You government allowed for that to happen. And now they have this in their hands. And then you have all this trouble with cannabis, and it's illogical, because hello, you have much worse things in.
And we know, but they know that, we know that. And then you hear a little bit about how other countries, right, they're dealing with people hiding worse drugs, bad drugs in the cannabis, right? Because we could talk about the Contra wars, right? We know the US is in support of drugs. So when we're talking about cannabis, it is a joke. And I think it's important we be very nonchalant about this is a joke. Like, it's a sad that we're wasting this much time talking about things that are this obvious. And we just need the old guard to get out. And I'm not going to turn this into a rocket science. Like, it's not rocket science, just like it's not rocket science to raise a minimum wage from $7.25 to a livable wage. And we're not going to sit and argue and debate with someone else who is not making sense, because they simply believe in the dollar, because that's what business taught them, because business schools don't teach you ethics. And you can ask everybody at Harvard and Georgetown, they don't teach you ethics either. So what point are we going to talk about the root problem here, right? That, like, people start startups so that they can sell the startups.
Well, it's funny because we have the power to do the right things, but it seems like nobody wants to do that. It's weird. It's weird. We don't want to. It's funny. It's funny.
Right.
It's also unfair.
It's unfair. Yeah. Especially when you learn. And I think this is where there's so much power in getting, like, the young people, younger folks, college kids around this, because that's what I was most inspired around, even social justice and labor organizing and building power when you're an indentured servant or a slave, right? And so it's like, it's not rocket science. You're just fighting against a system that would rather be mediocre, because that's how, for example, the US was created, was by being mediocre. It was literally being mediocre and taking things from other people. So why are we surprised, right? And that's the type of energy I try to present, but also trying to be mindful of, like, I'm still a Black person in America and have influence and need to be mindful of how I represent the work that I do and what I believe in. And I think that's kind of what maybe slows me down a bit, because it is so personal. But I also know that this is an experience other people are going to have to go through too. Like, in order, there's people who aren't dealing with any of the shame stuff. And then there's everybody else who's in this space also going through a very personal journey around shame and stigma and some type of trauma, and then running a business and trying to keep balance and sanity.
In this time, how in this experience and everything that we've talked about so far, how do you see the women's role? How do you see what our place is in the cannabis industry?
Yeah, well, you notice, they say, like, for example, Black women in America, right? Work so hard work, blah, 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 because we have to. it's a because we have to. And I think there's this interesting, for some of us who've been existing and navigating these spaces and kind of finding ourselves hitting the glass ceiling constantly and these walls, I think it's all it all strengthens and calls on this same muscle of like creating a space that speaks to you, because these other spaces are going to kill you otherwise. They don't value who you are. Actually, they're looking for a certain type of person and a certain type of behavior, and if you don't fit that, they're done with you. There's no security in that. So I think a lot of the people that draw themselves to the cannabis industry find themselves at a similar point of like, I'm just not going to deal with this anymore because it's not working for me. Or there's some type of net experience related to the war on drugs, which is really, really tied them very close to it, that it's almost pushing them in this place of like, I got to do something about this because I'm not going to see people benefit while my life was negatively affected because one of my family members was the target. And so I saw that the role that women play, we're the facilitators, we're the early adopters in this space. I'm not surprised. I often say, like, there's several people in it that I'm like, oh, I see why I look up to you. Like, the regular workspace wasn't working for you. And it's not working for the people who are there either. And that's the other part. It's not working for most of us.
It's true.
Oh my God. Well, you speak with such passion. That's the spirit we need in this industry, I tell you.
Yeah.
That's the spirit. Yes. Okay, I wonder, do you think that at some point social networks will be able to relax censorship?
I do think so. I think they're going to come up with some type of process for it, because I think that's the biggest issue, is that it's just a bot and there's nobody to go to. And I think, and that's just a tech issue, right? Like, come up with some type of process that you respond to so that you're checking our pages, especially as the law changes. So I know it's going to change eventually because the platforms are going to want the money. And the only reason they're not doing anything about it, because it will cost them more money to get the fine than to just ignore us and give us a bad remark.
How do you work around the censorship with your business? What tactics and approaches have you put into it to avoid it?
Well, when I get like a mark on my account for something, I try to fall back and ease up on the amount of posting that I'm doing and immediately change the language, because it's like you'll get relaxed for several months and you'll go back to using words like cannabis and spelling them all out. And then it just seems like maybe they're counting how many times you wrote it, but you might end up getting marked for something that doesn't even maybe have the word in it, but somehow the combination, hit you. So I try to pay note to when the bots kind of get us and we fall back, as well as try our best to not use those words as much and don't use images that have as much cannabis leaves in them. And this is a lot, I think, for people who are getting close to the 10K marker. Before we hit 10K, we didn't have any problems. Once we hit 10K and our visibility increased to like 40,000 impressions for a post, that's when the bot started to activate. And the same thing for my clients. When they were down at 4,000, it was fine. But once we hit and got the 10,000 mark, more visibility, more opportunities to get onto the Explorer page, more opportunities for the bot to get you. And that's the tricky thing. We used to make it on the Explorer page and get 1,000 likes. And then once the bots got us, in the algorithm, we don't even make it on the Explorer page. So I do that, as well as just forces. I mean, I think in a way, though, it forces me to focus on the hardcore work and not just lean on likes and follows, because initially there was the goal, just increase your following, increase, which I did pretty well over a 2-year period with the resources, with me being newer to that space. But now there needs to be more of a focus of like, well, who are these people, and like, what are they doing, and what are their behaviors, right? So like I said, I try to avoid certain words. I don't ever do any type of, I'm not flagrantly posting videos of consuming cannabis. People love images of you smoking. I do put those up. I've never gotten marked for any of those images at all. And I no longer create graphics that have images of cannabis in them.
And how does this make you feel regarding, you know, this state of, like we were talking before, it's illogical that if, okay, it's mostly legal in most of the country, and still you have, and we're talking about a medicinal plant, and still the language, and we have to censor ourselves so that we can spread the word. How has this impacted your community, and how, and even growing, or how you interact with the community itself?
Yeah, it definitely stunts your social media growth. That's without a doubt. It stunts your social media growth, and it has stunted it. I see that, like, it's very, very frustrating. In terms of the community, it just limits my reach, which hinders my ability to reach more people, you know, in different states. And that's frustrating. And then that forces me to rely on referrals and actually like getting into the community, and it forces me to rely on different partnerships, but those partners are also at the risk of that as well, but a little bit more unlikely, because they're not going to have as much content like that, that, you know, the algorithm can kind of find. And it also, we do these like calls out to the community sometimes where it's like, you know, the algorithm is messed up. Can y'all make sure you reshare this and like this? And so it will force you to rely on your community and be kind of vulnerable and transparent. You know, I'm always afraid of us getting canceled too. And then that's going to force me to get connected with our partners, or our people we wanted to have be partners with, and force me to get onto my email list and send out that message to everybody saying like, hey, can you put in that support request saying you can't find Black Dragon Breakfast Club, and can you bring them back? Because that's part of the process. And also, you know, calling out to our community and finding out the person who knows somebody at Facebook so that we can get our issue bumped up. So, it's like a reminder of even like navigating the regular world. It's all about who you know, about those real connections. Remind you, let me not rely on this app too, right? It's really about getting folks onto my email list, getting folks onto our website, and having real connections with them, which is what you should be doing. And so in a way, I'm like, yeah, we're censored, but I think also as a Black woman, I'm used to being censored too, and having this hard route. You know, sometimes people see my resume and they're like, whoa. And I'm like, it's just because I'm a Black woman. I've had to take like this route. It's just not necessarily this route. So part of the game.
And on the other hand, how have the debates been regarding the criminalization of cannabis?
The debate, I don't talk to people who don't get it. My circle is and when I do, it's a very like, I know how to comfort people in a way that's like, so how much sugar do you eat every day? You know, like, so do you have any pain medicine in your cabinet at all? So do you ever use opioids? Oh, okay, I was just curious. Like, I'm quick at this. So like, how often do you drink alcohol? Okay, just checking, because do you care about the consumption, or do you care about my lungs? Because you should be worried about the hot smoke tapping my lungs every day, not the flour that goes in my tummy. So in terms of debate and the legal side of it, that's not an issue. When it comes to, for example, I'm talking to a group of people connected to the Farmers Union, And now there's some conversation about home grow, and home grow being able to, that home grow being sold in dispensaries, right? Again, it's a deeper conversation. Like, what are you talking about? First of all, are you concerned about the quality control? Will quality control exist? Have you studied anything that's happening in Colorado? Okay, well, what issues are you concerned with? So for me, like when it, like debate, I rarely get debate opportunity. Also remembering as I'm a labor organizer, so I'm used to kind of organizing people.
And how, and continue with the criminalization of cannabis. What do you think is the perspective of it? How do you see the expungement thing, issue, and what do you think will happen? Do you think this will bring people out of jail at some point? Those who are paying because of marijuana.
Yeah, I mean, the war on drugs was about people needing jobs. This prison system here is just about putting a lot of Black men in jail. It's a problem and a big epidemic. It's very clear what's going on, what's been going on. Black people get targeted for cannabis all the time. It's the point. Cocaine and opioids are much more expensive and not as much accessible. So as long as our cities and governments are relying on the money that they get from prisons and for targeting Black people, it'll be an issue. But and this is what we're doing, is, kind of showing them you can get cannabis revenue and you don't have to kill Black people and brown people. I think as we continue to give it to them in a very Sesame Street language and messaging, like, please just stop targeting Black and brown people. You can get your money other places. You can still be on top. Stop. You can still be rich. Because that's all it really is. Because we can have like a more religious debate about it, but I have a hard time believing I have a hard time us having a religious debate, because we're not supposed to mix religion and law. So a person may have a religious perspective on what cannabis is, but then we have to now immediately separate them from that. And then if they want to have a conversation about cannabis as a drug and it's a gateway, I'm like, I need you to show me some facts and some people and some stories. As a labor organizer, I know it's all about people's stories. So anybody can come up with some facts and statistics, but until you present the stories, the real stories, which the opposition does not do, you don't have a debate. You're just saying things that you read from some talking points, or you're speaking a narrative that just supports your lifestyle. So that's the legal game with politicians, and just making sure that whatever the bills that are introduced don't conflict with their bills that they're introducing and they're most passionate about. Like, I'm also very clear, like, a lot of the politics are politricks. Take, for example, Ketanji Jackson, like getting appointed and all of the BS that she was dealing with. Like, it's like, this is a joke. So I'm not questioning it. There are politicians that have medical marijuana cards. I'm not concerned about kids getting a hold of cannabis, because we're prescribing kids drugs. So as long as we continue to prescribe kids with opioids, I'm not having this conversation about how this plant is causing addiction. I'm not doing that, because tobacco causes addiction and alcohol is addictive. So I need a better debate. I'm also not the politician that will be doing the debating. I'll be the organizer that's identifying the people to speak the stories to back up the big talk in the lobby day.
I think that's a better role. More productive.
It's just like, so what do you need? How many people do you need to be coached to go into this op-ed, to go speak on ABC, to walk with you when you go talk to your politician people? What do you like? Just come on.
Yeah, you're so right. Okay, after this wonderful interview, let me ask you, what are your plans for the future?
Yeah, well, I'm currently in an accelerator program to kind of identify a profitable business model. And I say that because, I'm doing marketing, but there's all these challenges in marketing. And we want to do events and ways to engage the communities and all this, but we're still working under a very illegal system. So just being very like transparent about like, okay, you have this cannabis accelerator program. Well, I've got a lifestyle brand. We've got a community that we've built. We've got services that we've offered. We've got a founder. We've got a team. Support, like help me help myself right now. And that's, I mean that from a very just transparent perspective. I had someone ask me, would you ever want to open a dispensary? Sure, but I'm in a very like realistic perspective of like, I worked for a startup that got the 5 million, and I watched everything that went into that. I don't know if I have that yet. And looking at the landscape in Philadelphia, people are not as collective minded as we want to think that we are. This is the green rush energy. And so I'm also going through my own challenge. I'm also going through it as I built this business. And so there's a bit of like wanting to be the tortoise. Because
yeah, and besides, since each state is different, each state goes and each community goes about plan differently, because you have then California, how they did it, and then you have New York now that's doing it their way, and then you have Colorado that did it some in their way, and each process brings like a learning curve that you have to take the best of it. And yeah, it's Philadelphia. I imagine that it has to be, it's still in like baby steps regarding it, right?
Yeah, like we're still in a stage where you got one group who's trying to come up with some language for a bill, and you got the politician and they didn't talk about him yet. And I'm like, well, why can't we all have a meeting? And these people want to keep this information, and those people want to, I'm the girl in the meeting, like, can we just, I get it. Everybody wants to be rich and everybody wants to be famous and everybody wants to be the face of it. But can you just give me some real information? Like, I see a lot of the politics of all of this too. And I see there's a lot more games and BS than like, let's just, if we have the ingredients and we know the measurements, let's make the cake. Let's bake the cake.
I wonder, Philadelphia at this point, it's a medicinal legal or it's recreational too?
Medicinal right now, and we will have an election for a new governor, and it'll probably happen around 2024, they said. The issue with a place like Pennsylvania has a large population of Black people. Education is horrible. Poverty is bad. The minimum wage is $7.25, but it's a great place to start a business.
Well, it has everything you need. It has the audience,
right? Like public schools, just like, so it's almost like racism is so obvious here. It's disgusting. You have a Black business, a white business right next to each other. They're not even. So, a lot of people who are maybe in California, people who are in a place like California who from Philadelphia will be like, you're dealing with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We're one of the most northern states, very traditional Protestant, I think, even the way we're seeing the way the Ukrainian, support from certain entities in Pennsylvania compared to you're not even supporting the Black people here. Pennsylvania is branded as an international place, place for the international folks to come and a great place to build business. Yet we don't care about people of color here at all. And it's more than obvious from a person who left, came back as a labor organizer, saw that the minimum wage was $7.25, started asking around and was like, huh? And then the sub minimum wage is $2.83, never worked a server job, started working a server job, became an organizer, realized that's a legacy of slavery. And then I wonder why Black people weren't working as servers and bartenders. And I thought that they just didn't want to. And then the Black people in the back said, no, they don't get hired. And you got hired because you're different. Because you came from, I'm a little different Black. I'm a little bit more alternative, white Black, little. And that's why I'm even serving.
I understand you. Because you see this whiteness, but I'm Latina. Right. And when I lived in Maryland for 5 years, and I saw their neighbors, and that same mentality, translates.
Yep.
And I saw it.
Yep.
I lived it in high school completely.
Yep.
And that was a whole lot of years ago, but still, the experience is there, and you see it, and you see how different they treat you and how they look down on you, and they don't assume that you can do things.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, part of, my mother moving us to Hawaii was because of her knowing that and her not wanting those experiences for me. And so it's interesting to come back and then be like, oh, it really does exist. And that's indicative of it taking me several years to get a job in Philly. And also just the challenges of getting jobs on the East Coast as a person of color. It's so clear the racism that I'm beyond. Like, I was really struggling over the past 10 years, like being in Philadelphia, because I wasn't accepting what was going on. And part of the journey into cannabis and just starting a business has helped me kind of realize what was going on. And that even as an organizer, my Black woman trauma was being used every time I got hired for a job even.
Yeah, but because we become like this publicity sign that we have her, we have the percentage we need.
Yeah. And that happens. And
it's sad because we are the same thing. We are bone, we are flesh, we are all children of God. I mean, it's just unfair.
Yeah.
It's just unfair. I feel you. I understand.
Yeah. So, and I have to say, like, cannabis is one of those things.
If you're Black or Latin or white, we are the same.
We're the same. We're the same. Like, and so I have a hard time accepting the, like, you thought, oh no, it's not the case. And cannabis would be the one thing that would like calm me. But I realized it was so much more. There's not enough cannabis in the world to help me be balanced from experiencing racism, classism, sexism in America. There's not enough. There's no drug in the world that can save me.
Yeah, there's still, the society has a lot of work to do with. It has a lot of work cut out to deal with women, to deal with color, to deal with race. It's incredible. And yeah, the plan helps somehow to build a community, because when you have with the plan, you just think, well, okay, cannabis is bringing us together, but it's because there's this like mindset that the community, the people in the community have, because they understand beyond the plant how the benefits of it. So it brings a positivity to the room, but there's still so much of it, of the rest behind, that you still have a lot of work to do.
I think one thing, as you said that, it made me think of, I didn't know that in the past, they say that it's recreational, but how recreational is it really? And I mean that from a sense of when we are imbalanced and we're nursing ourselves back to balance. Some people do that at the bar and they think they're nursing themselves back to balance, when in fact, they're just taking themselves somewhere else. And so I think there's this interesting way of looking at it. Like, I know we say we're recreationally doing things, but are we just recreationally numbing ourselves when we go and party and socialize and consume in that way, right? So it's just interesting things to think about.
Well, thank you so much. We have really appreciated this time. This has been a really nourishing and interesting conversation, and very lovely. Thank you.
Yes.
Do you have any last word for our readers, for people that are just getting into the business, or that still have, or that have time in the business and are dealing with these issues? What would you like to say to them?
Yeah, figure out a core why, like why you're here, why you're doing this, and get rooted in your mission. As I navigate this space, sometimes I get confused on what I'm doing, and then I have to remind myself, we're just here to change the perception of cannabis. If we can just do whatever we're doing, as long as we make sure we change the perception of cannabis, we're doing something right. And when I also then wonder what is going on here and why am I here, and I try to wonder my why, what's my why? I remember my why is just me. is that I am creating a space for me to be well and balanced. And I believe that as I do that, it will be created for others. And bringing all the other business things into it, but I think if we be rooted in our own why, and it's kind of like when they say, trust your gut, but you got to make sure your gut is healthy first. So that's kind of what I mean. Get rooted in your why and reanalyze and dive into your why, as in dive into yourself, so that your why does reflect who you are and the balanced parts of who you are, the parts that you want to be balanced, at least.
Once again, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for doing this interview with us with Cannabis World Journals.